But yesterday we spotted something, and given some credit, we spotted the Times. Because in passing to Richard Smith, I mentioned that Essex is once again breaking records, but perhaps not ones we'd like. The Times revealed yesterday that plans for a new Lower Thames Crossing from Kent into Thurrock now run to more than 359,000 pages. So we did a bit of digging around this and this claim yesterday, and have found that is the case, which makes it the biggest planning application ever. And if the pages were laid out in order, they would stretch for some 66 miles, which is far longer than the actual new crossing would be. But this actually can bring us to have a conversation about the planning system in this country. Is there a problem with it? If you forgive me, is planning an ass? 0800 111 4041 is the number to call. What are your experiences of trying to get things built in this country? I'd love to hear from you. It's been 15 years since plans for a new Lower Thames Crossing were first discussed. National Highways has spent around £800 million so far, and that's on a project that's yet to have a spade in the ground. Do we need to be better when it comes to getting things built in our county and beyond? What are your experiences in other countries? You're a travelled bunch. Would it be this situation in the United States? Would it be this situation in mainland Europe? Let me know. Last week, new funding was announced for the A12, but these improvements won't be carried out overnight, and who knows exactly when. That'll be a 3-lane stretch. You might welcome the scrutiny of big projects and say, actually, we need to go through the finer details, and these processes need to be adhered to, and if they don't, it could have repercussions if it goes completely wrong. So it needs to happen. Or do we just have to get the country moving? 0800 111 4041 is the number to call. Let's have a conversation about this. Feel free to listen and react to what you're about to hear. Ben Hopkinson is policy researcher at Britain Remade. They want to see better infrastructure, more investment, and the creation of new industries across the country. They're a pro-growth and say current policies are holding us back. Hi to you, Ben.
Hi, thank you for having me.
What does a 359,000-page planning document say to you about the planning system in this country?
I think it just shows that the planning system is holding us back. It's way too bureaucratic, requires way too much effort and uncertainty involved. The 359,000 pages, if one planning inspector was tasked with reading that all, it would take them nearly a year, flat out, 24 hours a day reading. It's ridiculous how long the planning application got for the Lower Thames Crossing, and it's not even been improved yet.
How would you simplify it, Ben?
I think that there are a number of key fixes that you could have. One which could be quite useful is to specify what form of consultation the National Highways has to do in order to get confirmation that they've done proper consultations. Because right now there's a need to constantly consult and then look over the responses and then consult on those responses again, which slows down everything. It's been 13 years since the Lower Thames Crossing was named a national priority infrastructure project. And as you mentioned, spades aren't even in the ground yet. It's clearly taking way too long to get a yes or no answer on should we build this key infrastructure.
But if somebody makes a valid point in the consultation that then needs to be referred back to, then doesn't that need to happen?
Yes, and we're not saying that we should totally scrap consultations, but we should do them in a much more ordered and principled way, rather than having to do round upon round. Hearing local voices is obviously incredibly important with how national infrastructure will affect the people living in Thurrock and living in Kent. And then we need to take those views forward and provide an updated response. But we shouldn't just be doing about 10 years of consultations. I think 80% of people surveyed wanted a new crossing built, and having to keep consulting just slows us down.
Do you think, Ben, there are campaign groups that set up There will always be that, not in my backyard, we don't want this here, and they do what they can to draw out the process for as long as possible. Are they guilty of slowing it down?
Yes, yeah, those campaign groups definitely exist, and they'll try any mechanism possible to hold down much needed infrastructure, whether it be a new road crossing for the very congested Dartford crossing, or new sources of clean energy, new housing, or new transport links to connect us better. Those groups exist, but they just keep trying to hold back the very much needed construction that has to happen in the UK.
Those groups, Ben, will say we're raising valid points. We think there are better alternatives, and then and they're not being listened to. So, are we guilty, perhaps, of just trying to stick to one plan without taking that into account? Would it not help the process if they were brought into the table? And then there was a conversation, all right, well, if we can't do this, what about this, until someone... Would that not be better? Because that doesn't seem to always happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously important to strike a balance, to hear very legitimate concerns about disruption that happens during construction, or about how the new road would look. But I think we've gone a little bit too far in one direction. I mean, after all, it's massively popular to build a new crossing, and it's taking £800 million and 360,000 pages to get to this point. We're clearly going too far in one direction, and not far enough in order to build the necessary crossing.
Do you know what happens in other countries when it comes to planning, Ben? Have you compared, how we do things over here to elsewhere in the world?
Yes. Yeah. So for the same amount of money that's been spent specifically on this planning application, Norway was actually able to build the world's longest road tunnel. So that's what we're doing is we're spending money having one part of the government ask another part if it's okay to build something. And for the same amount of money, Norway's actually built the world's largest road tunnel. It's clear that we're way over planning and the requirements needed to actually get a project to get the green light are holding us back, whilst other countries are getting spades in the ground and building these very impressive infrastructure projects.
Ben, we'll leave it there. Policy researcher at Britain Remade. What do you make of his comments? Are we going too far trying to pander to all individuals in planning processes? Your experiences are welcome. You could be a former councillor. 0800 111 40 41. You might be a developer. Maybe you've had a simple planning application in your property that you've had to go round and round the circuit, to get an extension. It took you 4 years, etc. Your experience, do you agree with what Ben has had to say? 08000 321 333. Start your message with the word Essex. You can give me a ring if you like. Let's get back to our discussion now, shall we, on whether planning is a bit of an ass in the UK. 0800 111 40 41 is the number to call. It is a phrase that comes up every now and again, isn't it, when it comes to trying to get things built. What have your experiences been? Do you agree with what Ben said earlier, that, the fact you've got a document that runs into 359,000 pages, has spent into the tune of £800 million and has already been 15 years in the making, suggests we are not doing something right? Or do you actually think, look, if you've got plans, they're not right, they're scrutinised, you go back to the drawing board, you need to get things right. It's better to do it properly and do it well than cut corners, and this is a massive project. Your thoughts welcome. 0800 111 40 41. Earlier I spoke to Laura Blake, the chair of the Thurrock Crossing Action Group, who opposed the Lower Thames Crossing. She told me how thorough the information was and gave her reaction to just how lengthy the planning document is.
Well, there's two things on that. Firstly is the fact that a lot of information we and others, including local authorities and major stakeholders, have been asking for years, which National Highways kept refusing to release until the DCO application was was accepted for examination. So that was frustrating. And secondly, no, we don't really see this as a planning issue. This is a national highways issue.
Okay, so just expand on that then.
Well, we think rather than focusing on the number of pages, people would be better off actually taking some time to review some of the information, and then they'd see what we're seeing, that the LTC would be hugely destructive and harmful. And most importantly, because everyone realises there's a problem, people would recognise the fact that the data shows what is being proposed won't solve those problems, and we need and deserve better. It doesn't matter how many pages there are. The evidence is showing, and it's not just us, it's local authorities and major stakeholders are saying it, there will be problems, and it's not going to solve the problems that we all think or hope some people will be resolved.
What do you make of what Britain Remade, they're a pro-growth campaign group, has said, who they've basically quite boldly said there's an unquestionable need for the crossing to cut congestion at the Dartford crossing and improve the air application, but the size of the application is insane and is symbolic of what is wrong with our planning systems today.
Well, I think the first thing to, as you quite rightly pointed out, is they are pro-growth. There's no doubt about that. And we've never denied the fact that there is a problem suffered because of the Dartford crossing. But what we actually need is a result that actually solves those problems, is more affordable and is more sustainable than what is being proposed. I'd love to sit down with people from Britain Remade and actually present to them some of the evidence with the data to back it up, and see if they still feel the same, because quite clearly we've said it, local authorities have said it, and major stakeholders, including the ports, all have serious concerns about what is being proposed and the issues that it would cause and the fact that it wouldn't solve those problems.
You know, it could be said, Laura, that from your perspective, because you're continually having to bang the drum about why you don't think this should go ahead, that is the reason it is so long. The fact you're not being listened to and you're constantly having to fight at every process is the reason why it's so long. So if you were listened to more, do you think that might be more favourable for you?
I don't think National Highways have done a very good job of listening. I don't think there has been proper, meaningful engagement, and that's not just us as a campaign group saying that. That came out as a constant theme throughout the examination from local authorities, from major stakeholders. The fact that the project has changed so drastically over the years, but still hasn't solved those problems, it just goes to show exactly how much documentation that has come out, but it's still not solving the problems that it's supposed to. I think that there is an inadequacy not only with the project, but also with National Highways. That was proven as well back in 2020 when the DCO application was refused because it wasn't deemed adequate. So the cost and the amount of pages seems to have come about because National Highways haven't been able to get the job done properly.
Do you accept any blame, Laura, that might be levelled at you for what's wrong with the planning system? Groups like yours have been described as NIMBYs and anti-growth.
No, we don't take any responsibility for any of that. As I've said, I think that the people that are pointing those kind of fingers, I would like to sit down and talk to them, because we're not saying that nothing should be done. We're saying that there are better, more affordable, more sustainable options. You know, I've said to you time and time again on the show about rail improvements between Ashford and Reading that would negate the need for a Lower Thames Crossing, wouldn't cost nearly as much, would actually get more freight off of the roads and onto more sustainable rail. Why hasn't the Port of Dover in this day and age got a rail connection? It's crazy. It's nothing to do with us as a campaign group, and it's not just us that are expressing these concerns. It's the local authorities, it's the major stakeholders, including the ports. And the examiners were very frustrated through the exam as well. At one point, one of the examiners actually couldn't believe the rate of inflation that National Highways had used for their assessments because it was so out of touch with reality.
Laura, do you think your campaign is going to see off this application completely?
Who knows? I mean, obviously that is the ultimate aim. The examiners through the examination asked some great questions and identified the problems and issues that we and the local authorities and major stakeholders have raised. They will make their recommendation, but ultimately it will come up to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of States previously have made some very bad decisions that have led to legal challenges. I'm actually attending a Court of Appeal hearing for Dr. Andrew Boswell today. That is also a case that featured heavily within the LTC examination, with the examiners asking for regular updates on it because of the relevance to the LTC, with whopping 6.6 million tonnes of carbon emissions that are predicted for the project if it goes ahead.
So there's Laura Blake from the Lower Thames Crossing Group, and she's pointing the finger back at the planners for not listening to what she says are valid concerns when it comes to the potential impact the Lower Thames Crossing could have on the surrounding area. 0800 111 40 41. Are the planning laws in this country outdated? Do they need reform? What are your experiences, please? You can text 81333. Start your message with the word Essex as well. We'll get to your messages and thoughts shortly. Let's chat to Paul Chapman first. Paul grew up in Billericay and is becoming a bit of an infrastructure expert for the show. As Vice President of the Association of Project Management. Wow. And a Senior Fellow in Operations Management at Oxford University. It's fair to say he knows his stuff. You're right, Paul?
Hi there, Ben.
Hi. So what do you make, someone of your expertise, make of the fact that we have... in existence, to do with Essex and the Lower Thames Crossing, a 359,000-page planning document?
That really is quite exceptional. The chap you had on earlier was saying about how long it would take that. I must admit, I've just done a review of 133 road projects in the UK, and I think I read maybe 15,000 pages, and it took me the best part of a year. I had a few other things on. So the crazy thing about that application is, where's the democracy in expecting people to be able to go through that amount of information? I really don't quite get it. I think there's a good argument for slimming that down.
Would you like to do it?
Well, the wider thing that I did take away, and it was great to listen to Laura earlier, I got the sense from her group, which is opposed to the project, at least they felt heard. I must admit, I've had a look at the Planning Inspectorate website, and you can go on there, if anybody's got a bit of time to spend. They actually list every single comment that they got, every input from individuals who will be affected to those who support it. It is really thorough, and so I am a fan of letting people have the opportunity to have their say. I know it's a terrible thing to say, but we're not French. I know. I say that because the French do have a historical reputation of the grand projet, which is where big projects are implemented top down. And the UK, we have more of a tradition of actually listening to people and allowing those who will be affected to speak. And I think their voices need to be heard. I have a lot of sympathy for people in the south of the county, and they will be negatively affected. But also we do need to hear from the people who will be get advantage from the project.
But at some point, Paul, I mean, let's be honest, if you plan to build something like this, there are going to be people against it and there are going to be people for it. And at some point, does there not need to be, right, actually, someone to make the decision, the overriding need is yes, the overriding need is no, without you don't need 300,000 responses, I don't know how many there have been, but you don't need 20,000 responses to get a reflection of where society's at, do you? You only need, 100 here, 100 there, and then go, right, actually, I've taken it all into account, and yes or no.
I think there's something to that, which is, to getting a balanced amount of information. But I think there's also a duty, because it's a public project, that people need to be heard. So how do we slim down to 100 from, if there was 20,000 people had an active view, how do we deny them voice? So I think they need to have their opportunity to have their say and be listened to, and that's democracy in action. But it does also need to be a timely decision needs to be made. So let's not get away from the advantages of the project. It will deliver economic and social benefit immediately around where the tunnel will be built. but it is also a national infrastructure project. So there'll be people all around the country who will wish to go from north to south, probably down to the ports, and then up into England, Scotland, Wales. And we need these essential components. If I can, I'm old enough, and I'm sure some of the listeners are, who can remember Essex back in the day. We were a really underserved county. So I can remember the M25 being built, the M11 Stansted Airport, and compared to the rest of the country, we really lacked good infrastructure. And the county's a better place for having it. But let's not escape from there will be people who were affected. I can remember the Stop Stansted Airports campaign, and they had a point. But as a nation, it was probably the right thing to do. So let's make sure those people get help. One other small thing, there was a chap on earlier who was saying about the tunnel built in Norway and how quick and cheap it was done. I did have a look at it. That tunnel, it looks lovely, but it has a forecast traffic of about 400 vehicles an hour, and that's 5% of what's expected for the Lower Thames Crossing, which is 8,000 vehicles an hour. So the like-for-like comparison just doesn't stand up.
Well, Paul, I mean, you looked into that quicker than I could in the course of a conversation with him, so thanks for that. Just in conclusion, I mean, what broadly, because we've got you and Laura saying, look, this, you know, people need to have their say. And we've got Ben who came on earlier and just said, look, you know, they had a consultation. The majority of people want it. So therefore it needs to be built. And how can we simplify the planning system to ensure that all sides are still happy?
And I think it's still the important point is that if you've got something that you feel you need to say, then you should be allowed to say it and it be heard. I do get the point that we also need to just be really careful on who are the experts, who's got a dog in the fight, because there's a lot of self-appointed groups who claim to have a big constituency and they're actually 3 or 4 people. So we need to be able to listen to the actual voices. And that's where sometimes going wider allows real people to have a real say. And like I said, they need to be listened to. And even if they disagree with the outcome, at least they felt they've been listened to. We can't let these things grumble on for years and years and blight people's lives. So at some point, a bit of mediation, a bit of kind of concession is required. And that needs a really transparent process.
It's interesting. Thank you very much, Paul, for your thoughts. Good to chat to you. It's Paul Chapman. I grew up in Billericay. Happy to take more calls on this after 11. Your experiences of planning in Essex, please. 0800 111 4041.